Down the River Suck and into the Shannon. Time off to explore around Loch Ree and into harbour in Lanesborough. More exploration of the Royal Canal and Richmond Harbour. Gulliver, our Dutch barge yacht, has carried us along the endless road to discovery. Today I'm in Boyle, and I was going to say I'm in hot water, but it's not. It's breathtakingly cold. The idea was to use the faithful angling cot to glide down the couple of miles of fast river between the town and Loch Key with its forest park. The reality feels more like a commando assault course. There's a knack to this. I used to do a bit of canoeing once, and a cot is like a slightly unwieldy canoe. You have to anticipate, to read the water ahead, and work out well in advance where the snags are and where you'll get the best flow of deep, fast water to carry you downstream. You don't use the paddle for propulsion as much as for steering. The river current does the hard work. You become so engrossed in another world when you're traveling a river. Now I can relax enough to enjoy the challenge around the next bend and appreciate the beauty of the surroundings. It's a little bit of wilderness, and wilderness is a treat. The assault course finally reaches Drum Bridge, which looks a bit military too, as though it was thrown up in a hurry by infantry advancing on an urgent objective. After the excitement of the fast river, a total change of pace and mood. We're entering a land of fantasy in the cot and by canal. Rockingham, the old Ascendancy estate which preceded the forest park of today, has its own miniature waterways network, a system of weed-choked canals. Some of these canals are follies, fantasies, whims, a fairyland created by a wealthy landlord for his amusement and the entertainment of his guests. Others had a practical purpose. They were used to bring boatloads of turf to feed the hungry throats of the dozens of fireplaces that kept the big house warm in winter. The King Harmons, landlords of Rockingham, have left, and so have their guests. Weeds are growing in fairyland. The dream has gone wild. There seems to be a symbolism to the rain, a cold shower to cool down the fantasy, a reminder of the fact of change. It never rained in fairyland. Strokestown House and Rockingham were the two greatest great houses in Roscommon. They united in an unlucky marriage early this century, Unlucky because the groom was killed almost immediately in the First World War. Rockingham certainly had the best views. The stable block escaped the fire that destroyed the house, but there's no longer any orders to harness the landau or the outside car. No longer a bell calling the ladies and gentlemen to morning prayer. We've stayed a little too long among the relics of old decency. Wind has come after the rain, raising choppy waves on the lake. We must push Gulliver into them to make shelter for the night. Navigation is not permitted after dark on this waterway, but we want to make Clarendon Lock in time to get a quiet berth where we can sleep without the angry sounds of water slapping the steel hull and wind whistling across the superstructure. We find our calm haven, sleep in shelter, the deep and satisfying sleep that comes after exertion of the muscles and the senses. A thin skin of metal separates us from a world of plants and fish and birds, a world full of small miracles of evolution, which the morning reveals.
The Shannon, being the largest river in Ireland, has all of the migratory species available in it that we have in Ireland. It has the Atlantic salmon, which, as you know, stays in fresh water for 2 years, and then is a very tiny little smolt of maybe 3 or 4 inches long, heads down along the Shannon and has already put in maybe 100 miles by the time it reaches the sea. It then goes to sea and travels another 1,000 miles out to sea, grows for a year, and then comes all the way back to the very spot where it was reared.
Now our migration rejoins the upper reaches of the Shannon and passes under Hartley Bridge, an elegant arch dating from the 1930s, and a chapter heading in the history of Irish architecture, because it was one of the first large structures in the country made of reinforced concrete. We're in the headwaters now, but it's difficult to say exactly where the Shannon navigation ends. Drum Bridge on the Boyle River is the limit for large craft on the northwestern spur. On the Shannon proper, there's one possible ending at Leitrim village, though once it was more a beginning than an end, and it will be so again. Acres Lake outside Drumshambo is the final port of call we've picked, though again, it wasn't always a terminus, and it won't always be one. This confusion arises because waterways shrink and grow according to the climate of history. The Ballinamore-Ballyconnell Canal connecting the Shannon to the Erne was intended to be the last link in an inland navigation chain from Limerick to Belfast. The chain was broken, but it's under repair.
I can keep all the nice things I see in my head and see them again, just by closing my eyes.
Sometimes children help us to see the future more clearly. For instance, recording something should be as simple as watching it. The new Ferguson Video with built-in satellite Video Plus. Nothing simpler. Ferguson, the bigger picture.
At Radio Rentals, you can option to own one of a great range of Olivetti personal computers.
Dad, you're great at that. No.
So, whether you're a beginner, want something for the whole family, or even want to set up a home office, there's a personal computer package just for you.
And now, at Radio Rentals, you can option to own an Olivetti multimedia package. There's no deposit, full service backup, and with the final payment, it's yours. Stay contented. Get radio rented.
Where would you start if you wanted to make a collection of the world's best rock tracks? You'd take bands like Rainbow, Deep Purple, Foreigner, Jethro Tull, Free, Black Sabbath and Thin Lizzy. You'd take artists like Gary Moore, Brian May and Alice Cooper.
I'll take whatever I want.
You'd take 100 tracks from the 100 best albums of all time and you'd cram them all on one CD set.
You're as cold as ice. Since you've been gone, since you've been gone.
It's called rock. But it's only available from Sounds Direct by post. So get a pen ready.
I've been driving all night, my hands wet on the wheel. The ace of spades, the ace of spades. Whoa, Black Betty, bam a lamp.
This 6 CD or cassette set has over 6 hours worth of original tracks.
Born to be wild.
To get your copy, call now. Rock from Sounds Direct. Sounds you can't afford to miss.
I'm approaching my last canal. The final destination is drawing depressingly near. The Loch Allen Canal was built early in the last century, but it also became derelict. It was reopened after a campaign by local people and waterways enthusiasts in 1978 as far as Acres Lake. If you pick your pace, a loch in the sunshine is one of the most soothing places in the world. The smell of waterweeds in the empty chamber, a lullaby of rushing water, time to chat with volunteers on the loch beams. In the old days, when communications were simpler, canals were conduits for news and information. The conversation at a loch had weight and importance. The tradition hasn't entirely died. There are ghosts left of the men who brought news of the progress of Napoleon's war or the health of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria's health is on my mind as I thread the boat up the narrow cut, or at least it seems just about as relevant to my present state as the news I overhear on Dick Carney's transistor radio. The soap opera of current affairs, which obsesses us so much, became meaningless many miles downriver. My favorite program now is the weather forecast. This canal, with its mind-altering powers, was built for a mundane reason: to carry coal from Erigna to Dublin.
The forerunners of Shannon navigation actually constructed the Loch Allen Canal back in the years 1818 to 1822. The main purpose was to afford the transportation of coal, iron, clay from the western shores of Loch Allen around the Erigna area. The works, the iron and coal works themselves, never really developed as fully as hoped. The commercial traffic didn't appear in the volumes expected, and the construction of the Ballinamore-Erigna branch of the Cavan and Leitrim Light Railway virtually put an end to commercial traffic on the navigation.
From time immemorial, men have picked at the coal seams, just as men have always floated in boats on the rivers and the lakes. But business interests developed, expanded and improved on both the coal extraction and the waterways. Barges loaded coal at the foot of the mountain, crossed the lake and entered the canal at Drumshambo. The last boat travelled the route in 1932, but in the very near future, boats will travel it again.
We're constructing a two-way navigation lock to enable boats to pass through from Shambo Bridge into Lough Allen. The lake at the moment is under the control of the ESB, and they, under their statutory powers, are allowed to fluctuate the lake by approximately 15.5 feet. Now, you could have the situation that the lake would be higher than the canal. In that case, you will lock down from the lake into the canal. Where in another situation, you could have the lake lower than the canal. In that case, you would lock up into the canal.
Locks are the punctuation marks that give meaning and order to a waterway. This is the last lock on the last canal on this journey. I shall miss Gulliver. A boat acquires a personality more quickly than any other inanimate object I can think of. This one is a lady of character with an interesting past. She's felt the hand of many masters on her tiller. She survived 2 world wars, saw good times and bad, and here she is, still doing the job, making sturdy progress up a remote Irish waterway. You've got to admire her. I was reading something last night by a Quaker botanist called Sarah Martha Baker, who lived in those Edwardian days when Gulliver was born. She believed the universe is always singing, and that man must learn to listen so that his heart may join the universal chorus. The idea has been swimming around in my head all day, like a fish in a tank.
See, it's quite easy, even if you don't have to be 6 foot tall and very strong to cast out. It's a pole fishing rod. It's about 7 meters long, and the line is the same length. So when I pull in, the fish actually comes to my hand. There's no reel on it. And because it's such a calm day, it's more sensitive fishing rod and it's easier to fish with. Well, you have to concentrate on the float, because the minute it goes down, you have to see it, you have to be quick to pull in. It's more in the knack, as I said, of pulling the fish in rather than strength. And probably women feel inhibited about going fishing. But once you start, it's quite enjoyable and it's very relaxing. I mean, it's a good way to get away from everything. I have about 10 pound, I'd say, in the net at the moment. I've been fishing for the last 2 hours. But people who come fishing here sometimes can get up to 100 pound weight of hybrid fish in a day. Also, we have avid fishermen who come every year on holidays here from England, all over Europe, France, Germany. But in general, people put the fish back. It's just the love of fishing.
line up Gulliver to thread the eye of a bridge, glance at the chart, and realize that it's the last bridge, the last time I have to make the delicate adjustments of throttle and tiller that have become second nature. She moves on steadily, with a swan's dignity. When the horizons start to open out a little bit and two navigation markers come into view, I realize we must be approaching Acres Lake and the end of the line. There's a Scandinavian feel to the spruce trees on the bank. I remember the Viking adventurers whose story was one of the main motivations behind my trip. The A-frame building is a symbol for another theme to have emerged from the journey. The realization that the Waterways supports a whole complex industry of leisure and tourism along its length. That I've not just traveled in history or through the wonders of nature. I've also learned about some of the economic realities of life in modern Ireland and shared a great sense of enjoyment with many different kinds of people.
In the early 70s, a sum of money became available to Leitrim County Council. My father, my late father, was at that time in the process of putting plans together for an outdoor leisure centre in this area, and he immediately got the county councillors to agree to the provision of £25,000. As a result, by 1972, we had an open-air heated swimming pool, children's playground, and 2 hardcore tennis courts. All that now in the past. The boats started coming up here in the mid-70s, and he then proceeded to encourage Bord Fáilte to locate the Chalk Ceol here, as he felt that with more and more boats coming to the area, that there was a need to provide some local entertainment. Hence, hey presto, our local amenity scheme, which we're all very proud of.
And as my last day on the water ages gracefully into evening, the past seems to re-emerge from the shadows. The landscape retains its essential nature, and the modern alterations dim away. I made this journey because I believe that the country I live in is the product of many layers of invading culture. And if you travel properly, it's possible to peel back the layers and establish a very direct contact with ancestral influences. It seems appropriate that our last supper together should be an atavistic meal. We eat, as so many generations of river travelers have eaten, by a fire of branches on the shore. And we think back. The Shannon is the river of knowledge. I've navigated up it, looking, searching, questioning. Tried to untangle the complicated ball of wool that knits together to make a modern Irishman. I have travelled through great beauty to some measure of understanding. You cannot ask for more than that.
And that was the last in the present series of Waterways. Next Tuesday at 4:30 we set sail aboard the beautiful Valhalla around the west coast of Scotland.